The alarm sirens screamed through Quarantine Station Epsilon 7, bouncing off the metal walls like angry spirits. Dr. Emily Grant ran as fast as she could down the long hallway. Her medical bag hit her side hard with every step. She had been working on the frontier for 3 years, so she knew what those emergency signals meant. They needed help right away because someone was dying out there. As she pushed herself harder, her lungs hurt. Every breath she took at the station made her throat hurt. Others on the crew pressed themselves against the walls to let her through, their faces tight with worry. Everyone knew what Emily's face looked like. It meant that trouble had come back to their door. "Talk to me, Tyler," she said into the small communicator clipped to her collar. She didn't stop for a second. For a moment, static crackled before Corporal Tyler Webb's voice came through, rough and tense. "Doc, we got a Galaxy scout ship. It's not in good shape. Very bad. Radiation leaking all over the place and holes in the hull. It looks like something chewed it up and spit it out." Emily's stomach dropped. The Galaxy. Those were the big aliens that looked like cats and thought they were better than everyone else. Their claws could cut through steel and their attitudes could cut even deeper. Most species in the Galactic Coalition tried to stay on their good side, but it wasn't always easy. The Galaxy warriors were proud and tough, and they didn't get along with other people. "Are there any survivors?" Emily asked, making a sharp turn and almost falling on the smooth floor. She caught herself on the wall and kept going. "That's the strange part, document. The crew left hours ago. They took an escape pod and left. But the scanners are still picking up one life sign inside the wreck. Only one." Emily's jaw felt tight. Did they leave someone behind? That didn't make sense. The Galaxy were fighters. They had all these rules about being honorable and being a brother. They didn't leave a crew member behind. Unless... "How long until I get there?" she asked. "Docking Bay 2. You're almost there." Emily pushed through the last set of doors and into the huge docking bay. The area was huge, big enough for 3 or 4 ships, but all she could see right now was the wreck. The Galaxy scout ship looked like a dying animal, with its smooth metal body twisted and blackened. There were scorch marks on the sides and she could see real holes where something had punched through. There were still wisps of smoke coming from the broken parts, and the whole thing glowed with a sick orange light from the radiation leaks. Tyler and his security team had already put up a barrier around the ship. They wore protective gear that made them look like they were exploring deep space. Tyler stood near the door with his weapon ready but pointed down. His face went from professional to worried when he saw Emily. "Doc, are you sure about this? That level of radiation is pretty high. If you stay in there too long it could cook you." Emily was already putting on her own safety gear. A breathing mask, thick gloves and a scanner strapped to her wrist. She had done this dance before but not with a Galaxy ship. "What height are we talking about?" "High enough that our guy inside should be dead by now. But somehow they are still alive." Tyler gave her a radiation detector that made a scary noise when it clicked. "You have about 30 minutes before it gets dangerous." "That's it, I'm taking you out no matter what." "That's fair." Emily put on her mask and picked up her first aid kit. "Keep the scanner on me. When I ask for help, I mean it." "I understand. Doc, be careful in there." Emily didn't take long to answer. She ducked through the rough hole where the ship's airlock used to be. The inside was worse than the outside. A lot worse. The lights went on and off, making strange shadows all over the place. Control panels sparked and sputtered, sending small bursts of electricity into the smoky air. The metal floor was hot under her boots and she could feel it even through the thick soles. Even though she was wearing a mask, she could still smell it. Something else, burned metal and melted plastic. Something natural and wrong. She used her handheld scanner to go deeper into the ship, stepping carefully over broken metal and other debris. The Galaxy made their ships in a different way than people do. Everything was bigger, made for things that were more than 7 feet tall. The hallways felt like caves and the ceiling was too high for her to reach. The closer she got to the life sign, the faster her scanner beeped. The radiation was also getting stronger. It sounded like a constant buzz now that her detector was clicking so fast. She should go back. Any reasonable doctor would go back. But Emily had lost her mind completely about 2 years into her work on the frontier. You couldn't be sane and work here. Not really. She found him in what looked like the crew's living quarters. The room was a wreck. People had thrown around furniture like it was a toy. Some huge force made the walls bend inward. There was a Galaxy warrior slumped against the wall like a broken toy. Emily had seen Galaxy before but never this close. Not like this. He was huge even when he was sitting down. If he could stand he would have been about 7.5 feet tall. His fur was a deep golden color like honey in the sun, but it was matted with blood and burned in places where the radiation had literally cooked him. His uniform, which looked like military gear, was ripped and torn. His right leg was bent all the way wrong, at an angle that made Emily's legs hurt just looking at it. But his face made her stop. There was something noble about his face, even though he was in pain and barely conscious. He had high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and ears that were pressed flat against his skull in pain. His eyes were shut, but he was breathing shallowly and painfully, with his chest moving up and down. "Hey," Emily said softly as she knelt down next to him. She moved slowly and carefully. Even when they were barely alive, hurt predators were still dangerous. "Hey, I'm a doctor. I'm here to help you." Those golden eyes opened and closed. They were both beautiful and scary. The pupils were slits like a cat's, and they stared at her with such intensity that she wanted to step back. But she stood her ground. His lips moved. His lips pulled back and you could see that his teeth were made for tearing meat. But he wasn't trying to scare her. He was trying to say something. "Kes then," he said in a rough voice. His voice sounded like heavy wheels crushing gravel. "Leave me? I am less than." Emily didn't know what the word meant, but she got the tone. He told her to leave. To let him die here. "Yeah, that's not going to happen, big guy," she said as she took out her medical scanner. She ran it over his body, and the readings made her heart sink. This was not good. Very bad. Very bad radiation poisoning. Bleeding inside the body. Damage to organs is possible. That leg wasn't just broken, it was broken in a lot of places. He would die in 2 days without treatment. Maybe not as much. When Raxthor opened his eyes, the first thing he noticed was that he wasn't in pain. For 3 days in a row, he felt like his body was being ripped apart from the inside. Every breath felt like swallowing shards of glass. His heartbeat sent waves of fire through his veins. But what now? Now he only had a dull ache that was bearable and almost peaceful compared to what he had been through. For a moment, his vision swam before it got better. He didn't know what the ceiling above him was. The smooth metal panels bounced soft white light back. Everything looked neat, tidy, and completely new to me. There was a soft hum of machines in the air around him, a steady beat that was very different from the loud noises of Galaxy medical facilities. Where was he? This ship was definitely not his. The wreckage should have been his grave. His warrior instincts told him that something was very wrong, and panic began to build in his chest. His claws automatically flexed, scraping against the soft bedding instead of the cold metal floor where he had fallen. He tried to sit up, but his body felt heavy and slow as if he were moving through thick water. At that point he saw her. The woman was sitting in a chair next to his bed, close enough that he could have touched her. She was leaning her head back against the wall in an uncomfortable way that would probably make her neck hurt when she woke up. She was asleep, with no one watching her, and a Galaxy warrior was sitting right next to her, able to kill her even though he was weak. Raxthor looked at her, his panic still fresh but his confusion growing. She was very small. She looked like she could break at any moment, according to Galaxy. People rarely grew taller than 6 feet, and this one looked even shorter than that. Her frame was small and fragile, which his people would see as a weakness. But even when she was asleep, there was something about her face that made her look strong in a different way. Her dark hair was pulled back into what was probably a neat ponytail at first, but now it was a mess. Some strands had gotten away and were hanging around her face. There were dark circles under her eyes that looked like they had been up for days. Her skin was pale, almost gray because she was so tired. Her medical uniform was wrinkled and dirty. Raxthor's better vision let him see the details of those stains. Blood. His blood. The dark purple-red of Galaxy blood stained her sleeves and chest. How long had she been sitting there? How long had he been out of it? Raxthor's mind raced as he tried to figure out what had happened. He thought back to the attack. The Kreth ambush had ripped through their ship like it was made of paper. He remembered the weapon that had made him feel sick with its green light. He remembered the burning feeling that started right away and spread through his body like poison. He could still see the faces of his crew as they realized what had happened to him. They were horrified and disgusted. The voice of Commander Thexgale rang in his head, cold and final. "You are marked. You are infected. You are less than. We can't take the chance of bringing you with us. May your death be quick and honorable." They had locked the door. He was left in the wreckage. They left him to die alone because the Kreth weapon had marked him as dirty, broken, and worthless. He ought to be dead. He had accepted it as he lay there in the ruined crew quarters. The radiation was slowly cooking him. His leg was broken. Bleeding inside was killing him from the inside out. It seemed like death was going to happen, and it was welcome. It's better to die than to live as Keston, the dishonored one. But he wasn't dead. He was in this strange place, and it was clear that this woman had saved his life. What? It didn't make sense. People and Valaxi weren't enemies, but they weren't friends either. The Valaxi Empire had always thought less of humans. They called them soft claws. They thought they were weak, both physically and culturally. Why would someone put their own life in danger to save him? Raxthor tried to get up and move, but he quickly regretted it. Pain shot through his right leg like lightning, sharp and painful enough to make him hiss through his teeth. It was a loud, predatory noise that came from deep in his chest and filled the quiet room. The human's eyes flew open right away. Not the slow, confused waking of someone who is very tired, but the quick alertness of someone who has been trained to deal with emergencies. Her head came up, and those eyes, a bright green color he'd never seen in a Valaxi before, stared at him with surprising intensity. "Hey, take it easy," she said, her voice rough from sleep but steady. Before he could blink, she was on her feet and walking toward him. "You have a broken leg that is still knitting together. If you move too quickly, you'll ruin all the work I've done." Her hands were already checking one of the machines next to his bed and making adjustments with ease. She moved without fear or hesitation, as if she had done it 1,000 times before. It didn't even bother her that he was a Valaxi warrior who could rip her apart. Raxthor watched her work while he tried to figure everything out. She moved quickly but gently. She was aware of what she was doing. The machines around him changed their humming sound as she touched them and made changes. "Why?" His voice sounded like gravel being dragged across metal, and the word came out rougher than he meant it to. He felt like he had been swallowing sand for days. The person looked at him with one eyebrow raised. "Why what? Why did you help me?" Raxthor's claws flexed again, but this time it was out of anger, not instinct. "I am Keston. I am broken in honor. Polluted. You should have let me die on that ship." She stopped working and really looked at him. It was hard to tell what she was thinking. Not angry, not feeling sorry for them, just thinking. It was as if she was trying to figure out how to explain something that was clear to someone who couldn't see it. "First of all, you're not contaminated," she said as she turned to pull up a display screen on the wall. Charts and graphs with medical information that Raxthor couldn't fully understand showed up. "I've tested your blood, your tissues, and everything else I know how to test. That weapon from Kreth? It left a genetic trace on you. Like putting a GPS tracker on someone. It's not risky. It won't spread. It's just a marker." The words hit Raxthor like a punch. That can't be right. Commander Thexkael said that the contamination would spread to the crew. That I was a danger to everyone. Then your commander was either lying or wrong. The person's voice was matter-of-fact. It wasn't mean, but it wasn't kind either. "Just be honest. You're fine. The only thing wrong with you is the injuries from the attack. Your crew left you because of a fancy tracking device." Raxthor felt something break inside of him. Not pain in the body, but something worse. They had left him for no reason? The Korveth, the holy warrior code that governed every part of Valaxi military life, had been used to leave him because of a simple marker? He had accepted his fate as Keston and that his dishonor was real and deserved, but it had all been based on fear? About not knowing? "I don't understand," he said quietly, and he hated how lost he sounded. "Why did they leave me if there was no contamination?" Fear, most likely. And maybe the person in charge didn't want to deal with soldiers who had been marked by the enemy. It's easier to just say, contamination, and move on. The person moved back to the bed, and this time her face softened a little. "By the way, I'm Dr. Emily Grant. And you are Raxthor. I found your ID in the pieces of your uniform that were left over." "Dr. Emily Grant," Raxthor said again, trying out the strange name on his tongue. It didn't sound like Valaxi names, but it had a strength of its own. "You are a healer." "That's right. I've been doing this for about 8 years, 3 of which have been out here on the frontier." Emily moved the chair closer and sat down again, looking directly into his eyes. "Hey, I know this is a lot to take in. Your crew left you, you almost died, and now you're waking up in a strange place with someone from a species that your people probably don't respect very much. But I need you to help me out here." The door to the medical bay slammed shut with a loud bang that shook the walls. The locking mechanism made a series of loud clicks and clunks, each one sounding final and certain. That door was now locked up tight and everyone on the station would know it. Corporal Tyler Webb stood in front of the door in the hallway like a human wall. His arms were crossed over his wide chest and everyone could see his gun on his hip. The message was very clear. Tyler said to the empty hallway, "Nobody gets through this door without Doc Grant's permission." His voice had the serious tone that soldiers used when they meant business. I don't care if you're the Queen of England or the station commander. I'm not going to change my mind about those rules. Emily was moving around the medical bay like a possessed woman. Her fingers moved so quickly over the keyboard of her terminal that they were almost a blur. She opened up the Coalition database and looked through pages of medical ethics rules and legal codes. She also looked for any historical examples that could help her protect her patient. Her eyes moved quickly between different screens, taking in information at a speed that would have made her medical school teachers proud. Even though the air conditioning was on, she was sweating on her forehead. Anyone who knew her would have known right away that her jaw was set in that stubborn way. The look on her face said she had made up her mind and nothing short of the universe exploding would change it. Raxthor watched her from his hospital bed, which was propped up a little so he could see better. The regenerative brace was still holding his hurt leg in place, but his mind was racing. Before he was left behind, he was a military strategist who knew how to figure out situations and odds. And right now the odds did not look good. "This is stupid," he said, and even though he tried hard, his voice came out softer than he meant it to. "You are one person. One doctor at a small station. There are thousands of warships in the Valaxi Empire. A lot of warriors. They could turn this whole station into dust without even slowing down." Emily kept typing and didn't even look up at him. "Thank goodness I'm not going to fight their warships." "So what are you going to do?" Raxthor's ears twitched forward in interest, even though he didn't want them to. "You heard Commander Velos. The High Command has officially said that I am dead. They want me to be thrown away. How can you possibly fight that?" "I'm not fighting with weapons," Emily said, finally stopping to look at him. Her green eyes were full of determination. "I'm fighting with facts. With honesty. By making this so public, they can't just ignore it and act like it never happened." She hit one last key hard and then turned her chair to face him completely. "I just sent detailed reports to all the members of the Coalition Council. Every news network that reports on issues in the frontier. All the diplomatic channels I could get to. Medical scans, ship logs, communication records, everything." Raxthor felt his breath stop. "What did you say to them?" "The truth. That the Valaxi army has been leaving behind soldiers who were marked with Kreth weapons. That they have been calling it honor and contamination when it is really just fear and ignorance. That they would let you die or worse to hide their own mistakes." Emily leaned back in her chair, and even though she looked tired, she also looked happy. "At this point, every major news organization in Coalition space knows your story. They know what happened to you. You've started a war," Raxthor said slowly, his mind racing with the possibilities. "It's a war of words but still a war. The Empire will be very angry. They'll come after you. Let them come." Her voice was calm and strong like steel. "Because if they do, they'll have to tell the whole galaxy why they want to kill a wounded soldier who should never have been left behind in the first place. They'll have to face the fact that their precious code of honor is based on lies and superstitions." Raxthor looked at her in shock. This tiny woman, who his people would call weak and soft, had just declared war on one of the strongest military empires in known space. And she had done it with nothing but information and a strong will. He thought it was the bravest and maybe the dumbest thing he'd ever seen. He said quietly, "They will kill you for this. Even if they can't do it in public, they will find a way. Your job will be over. Your name is ruined. You might never be able to work as a doctor again. Then I'll do something else." Emily shrugged as if she were talking about the weather instead of the end of her whole career. "I didn't become a doctor to get a good name or a good job. To save lives, I became a doctor. And that's what I'm doing." "But why?" Raxthor's claws flexed against the hospital bed, showing that he was upset. "Why put everything on the line for me? I am Kesthan. People in my own group have said I'm worthless. Why would you, a person, care what happens to me?" Emily was quiet for a long time. When she did speak, her voice was softer but still strong. "Do you want to know what I see when I look at you, Raxthor? I don't see any of those Valaxi words, like Kesthan or honor broken. I see a soldier who was hit by an enemy weapon and then left behind by the people who were supposed to protect him. I see someone who was told they were worthless and dirty when they were really just a pain in the neck and scary to their leaders." She got up and walked over to his bed, where she could see his golden eyes. "I see someone who deserves better than to be left to die on a crashed ship because his culture values reputation over lives. And maybe I'm just a stubborn person who doesn't know when to give up, but I learned a long time ago that if no one stands up for the people everyone else throws away, we're all lost." The door rang before Raxthor could answer. Emily looked at the monitor, and her face changed to one of shock before she hit the unlock button. Dr. Helen Reeves rushed into the medical bay, her many compound eyes shining with worry in the bright light. The Hytherian scientist had a lot of gear and data pads on her. Her insect-like arms were able to handle it all with ease. She looked tired, and her exoskeleton was dull from not getting enough sleep. Helen said, "Emily, I got your message about what's going on." Her voice was a little shaky, like Hytherians' voices were when they were stressed. "This is risky. Very dangerous. Do you know what you've begun?" "I know exactly what I've started," Emily said, but she sounded grateful. "Did you bring what I asked for?" "All the information I could find on Valaxi neurochemistry and behavioral biology." Helen dropped her load on a table nearby with a bang. "Emily, you need to know something. When Valaxi is declared Kesthan, something important happens to them." Both Emily and Raxthor turned to look at her with all of their attention. Helen's antennae moved nervously. Their honor system isn't just a cultural or mental thing. Part of it is biological. Helen brought up holographic displays that showed complicated chemical structures. When a Valaxi is declared Kesthan, when they really think they have lost their honor, their body chemistry changes. Their bodies are flooded with stress hormones. Neurotransmitters that control the instinct to survive start to shut down. Like their body is getting ready to die. Emily's stomach felt like ice was forming. How long do they have? Most Valaxi who are really Kesthan die within weeks. Sometimes they kill themselves, sometimes they take crazy risks in battle, but most of the time their immune systems just stop working. Their bodies give up. Helen's antennas were pointing straight at Raxthor. "You should be in the middle of that waterfall right now. Your biochemistry should be falling apart." "But it's not." "Why not?" Emily said. The communication screen crackled to life with a burst of static, and then it cleared to show a face that made even Emily's brave front falter for a second. High Commander Thexkael took up the whole screen, and even through a digital screen his presence was too much. Even for Valaxi he was huge. Emily had never seen a warrior with shoulders as wide as his. He looked like he could break down a reinforced steel door with his bare hands. There were silver streaks in his dark fur, which were signs of age and experience that showed he had fought in more battles than Emily could ever imagine. His amber eyes were like frozen fire, cold and calculating as they stared at her with a predatory look. His voice rumbled through the speakers like distant thunder, and each word was clear and full of power. "I am High Commander Thexkael of the Valaxi Imperial Fleet. You are in possession of Empire property. You will give it up right away." Emily's hands were in fists at her sides, and her nails were digging into her palms so hard that it hurt. She made herself take a slow breath and keep her voice calm and professional, even though her heart was pounding against her ribs. She could see them through the big window in the back of the medical bay. Ships of war. 5 huge Valaxi battlecruisers are floating in space like predators waiting to attack. Each one was big enough to hold thousands of soldiers and had enough weapons to break a moon in half. And they were all aimed at this small station. She said, "I'm Dr. Emily Grant," and was surprised at how steady her voice was. "And I'm taking care of a patient, not a piece of property. A person. A real person with rights under coalition medical law." The High Commander's ears flattened a little against his head, which was a sign of anger that Emily had learned to recognize when she was with Raxthor. Raxthor is Kesthan. He has lost his honor. The Valaxi people say he is dead in every way that matters. What is left is just a shell, biological matter that must be thrown away according to our customs. Give up his body and we will leave in peace. His body? Emily felt anger rise in her chest, which helped her get rid of some of her fear. "Commander, he's right here. Very much alive. His heart is beating, his lungs are breathing, and his brain is working well. In what world does that mean dead?" She moved over a little so the camera could see Raxthor in his hospital bed behind her. Even though it must have hurt, he had somehow gotten himself into a sitting position. His injured leg was still locked in the brace, but his spine was straight and proud. His golden eyes were glued to the screen, where his old boss was, and Emily could see the muscle in his jaw working as he ground his teeth. Thexkael's face didn't change much, but Emily saw a flash of something in those cold eyes. What a surprise. Uncomfortable? It was hard to tell what Valaxi was feeling from their face. "The Kesthan does not speak," Thexkael said, and his voice got deeper and more dangerous. "It has no voice, no honor, and no right to be a part of our society. You don't know how we do things, human. The Korveth is holy. For 10,000 years, it has ruled over our people. Someone who has been marked by enemy weapons or who is sick should not be allowed to spread that sickness to others. It is kind to end a warrior's suffering quickly. Dirty?" Even though Emily tried to stay calm, her voice got louder. "Commander, I've sent you the medical information. I've sent it to everyone. There is no pollution. The Kreth weapon left a genetic mark on him. It's just a tracking device. It can't spread, it can't make anyone sick, and it's totally safe. Do you doubt the wisdom of the Valaxi High Command? Thexgale's voice got a dangerous edge. You, a human doctor who doesn't know anything about our biology or culture, think you can tell us what is and isn't a threat to our people? Emily shot back. I'm a doctor who has been studying Valaxi physiology day and night for the past 2 weeks. I know more about your secondary circulatory system than most of your own medical staff. I know that your brain chemistry reacts to honor and shame in ways that are partly biological. And I know you left Raxthor not because he was dangerous but because you were scared. Scared that the Kreth will find them. You were afraid of looking weak if you said you didn't know how to use the weapon. You said he was Kess then and let him die, and now you want to finish the job before anyone asks questions that make you uncomfortable. The silence that came after was so thick that it could have crushed the air. Thexgale's face was completely still, like a predator's, which meant that a Valaxi was either about to attack or figuring out what to do next. Emily could hear her heart pounding in her ears and feel sweat running down her back even though the medical bay was cool. You have made a grave error, Dr. Grant, Thexgale said finally, his voice dropping to a whisper. The Empire does not forgive insults. We won't let anyone mess with our internal affairs. We don't talk to people who have our warriors as hostages. Emily said through gritted teeth, I'm not holding anyone hostage. Raxthor can go whenever he wants. But he's under my medical protection, which means that no one can kill him just because it's good for politics. Then you have made your choice. Thexgale leaned forward a little, and the room's temperature seemed to drop by 10 degrees. I have the right to pay for the return of Valaxi property. Tell me how much you want, human. Credits, resources, and good trade deals. Anything you want as long as it's reasonable. Emily was speechless for a brief moment. He was trying to pay her off. This commander of a huge fleet was literally trying to buy her patient like he was a piece of furniture. Let me make something very clear, Commander, Emily said. Her voice had turned cold and all the warmth had been burned away by rage. Raxthor is not for sale. Not for all the credits in coalition space. Not for good trade deals. Not for anything. He has rights and I will do everything I can to protect them. Thexgale's eyes turned into slits. Okay then. Since you won't take payment, let me give you the other option. We have made this a matter of Valaxi's internal security. We want the Coalition Council to tell you to give up the Keston right away. If you don't, you'll be charged with taking hostages and interfering in Imperial business. Your job will end. Your name will be ruined. You will never be able to practice medicine in Coalition space again. Then I guess I'll find a place outside of Coalition space to practice, Emily said, sounding calm even though she was screaming inside. Because I won't give him up. Not to you, not to anyone. You are a fool, Thexgale said without any emotion. You can't win this fight. Maybe not, Emily said. But at least I'll know I tried. Can you say the same thing, Commander? Can you really say you're proud of leaving a wounded warrior behind when you look at yourself? Of trying to kill him to hide your mistakes? There was a flash of something across Thexgale's face, maybe anger or shame or both. But before he could say anything, the screen went dark. He had cut off the transmission. Emily leaned against the console, and her legs suddenly felt like water. She had to hold on to the edge of the desk to keep her hands from shaking so much. She had just yelled at one of the galaxy's most powerful military leaders. She had basically signed her own death warrant, or at least the death warrant of her job. That was either the bravest or the dumbest thing I've ever seen anyone do, someone behind her said. Emily turned to see Tyler in the doorway. He looked like he was both impressed and horrified. Tom Hayes, the station's chief engineer, stood next to him. His huge body filled the rest of the doorway. Doc, Tom said in a deep, rumbling voice, you know they're probably going to try to cut power to this bay now, right? Try to get you out. Let them try, Emily said, standing up straight even though her hands were shaking. How quickly can you change the power systems? Tom's face, which was weathered, slowly broke into a smile. Did it already. This medical bay now has its own power line that is completely separate from the main station grid. To shut you down, they'd have to come in here and pull out the generators. Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. Tom, you might lose your job for that. Yeah, well, 3 years ago you saved my sister's life when she got stuck in that reactor breach. Doctor said she was too far gone, but you wouldn't let go. Had surgery for 18 hours straight. Tom's face softened. Figure I owe you one. Tyler said, include me too. Nobody can get through that door without going through me first. Her communicator buzzed before Emily could answer. She looked at the screen and felt her stomach drop. Commander Velos was the one who called, and he sounded angry. "Dr. Grant," he said, his voice full of barely contained rage, "what have you done in the name of the Coalition? I have the Valaxi High Command yelling at me, the Council asking questions, and half of the station wanting to know if we're about to be blown up. Come to my office. Now." It had been 6 months, and Station Epsilon 7 looked very different. You couldn't miss the changes, they were everywhere. What had once been a forgotten quarantine center on the edge of nowhere had changed into something completely different. Something that matters. Ships came every day, and sometimes 3 or 4 at a time. Some people came here to get medical care for injuries or illnesses that other places had given up on. Some people came just to find a safe place to get away from the chaos of the border wars. Half of the galaxy knew the station as the place where no one was turned away, where species that usually hated each other worked together, and where miracles happened every day. There was always a lot going on in the hallways, and the sounds of many different languages mixing together. You could hear the clicking speech of the Hytherians, the deep rumbling of the golems, the melodic tones of the Zenthari, and yes, even the growling consonants of the Valaxi. The medical bay had grown so much that it now took up 3 more wings of the station. What used to be empty crew quarters and storage areas were now cutting-edge treatment centers, operating rooms, and recovery wards. Dr. Emily Grant was the only person on the main observation deck, which was a huge room with windows that went all the way up to the ceiling and looked out into the dark void of space. She held a coffee cup in both hands, which made her fingers warm against the ceramic. It was only a little after noon, and this was her 4th cup of the day. She knew she should probably drink less coffee, but these days coffee was one of the few things that kept her going. She saw a Valaxi transport ship glide smoothly into one of the docking bays. Its smooth hull reflected the light from the star nearby. For a short time she let herself stop worrying, stop planning, and stop moving. A moment of peace to look at the stars and think about why she took on this impossible job. A familiar voice from behind her said, "You look tired," in a warm and concerned way. Emily turned around and smiled without thinking. Raxthor was walking toward her on the observation deck, and every time she saw him, she felt a little proud. He hardly limped anymore, there was only the smallest hitch in his step that you would have to look for to see. The regenerative treatments had worked perfectly. His leg had gotten stronger after it healed than it had been before he hurt it. Instead of the military armor she had first seen him in, he wore modified medical scrubs. The scrubs were made just for him, with extra room for his tail and a bigger fit. He had a datapad in his hands that was full of patient charts and treatment notes. He had changed completely after 6 months of hard training. The broken warrior she had found dying in the crashed ship was no longer there. Someone else had taken his place. Someone who made things better instead of worse. Someone who didn't kill people but saved them. He was a medic now, and a damn good one. Emily had made sure of that by making him practice everything from basic first aid to complicated surgical procedures over and over again. He took it all in like a sponge, and his warrior's discipline and sharp mind made him a great doctor. "I'm always tired," Emily said with a little laugh as she took another sip of her coffee. "Comes with the job. But it's a good kind of tired, you know? The kind that shows we're doing something important." Raxthor stood next to her at the window, and his golden eyes followed her to the Valaxi transport. He said, "That ship is bringing in 17 new patients." His voice was the deep rumble she was used to. "I've already looked over their files. Mostly civilians from the most recent border fights. 2 will need surgery and maybe 3 will need it depending on how well they respond to the first treatment. I have already set up Surgical Bay 2 and told Dr. Helen to be ready." Emily really admired him when she looked at him. "You're getting really good at this. You didn't know the difference between a scalpel and a suture 6 months ago. You're doing triage like you've been doing it for years now." Raxthor said, "I had a great teacher," and there was a warmth in his voice that still surprised Emily sometimes. Valaxi weren't supposed to show their feelings, but Raxthor had broken a lot of the rules of his culture. "A stubborn person who wouldn't let me give up even when I wanted to. Even when I thought I had nothing to live for." Emily's throat felt a little tight. She had heard Raxthor say thank you before, but it always made her feel good. "You did the hard part. I only gave you the right direction. You did a lot more than that." Emily knew that Raxthor's ears twitching meant he was carefully thinking about what he was going to say. "But there is something else on that transport. Something more than the patients." "What do you mean?" 3 more Valaxi are on their way. Not patients, not regular people. Warriors who were marked by Kreth weapons and left behind by their units just like I was. Raxthor's voice had a weight that came from his own experience and understanding. "They heard about Epsilon 7 station. They heard about the Kesvoth, the one who was rebuilt with honor and found meaning after being declared dead. They want to know if they can do the same thing. Emily carefully put down her coffee cup, but her mind was already racing. 3 more. That made 8 Valaxi who had come to the station for safety after being left behind. 8 warriors who had been thrown away by their own people like trash and somehow made it here looking for a second chance. Will you help them? She asked, even though she already knew what the answer would be. Of course, Raxthor said right away. I'll give them what you gave me. A decision. An opportunity to transcend Kes then and the breach of honor. Some people will agree. Some might not. The programming goes deep. But they should know that there is another way. Emily slowly nodded. This had become their mission, their goal beyond just treating injuries and diseases. They were making something bigger here. A place where the rules could be changed, where military codes and cultural traditions didn't decide how valuable someone was, and where anyone could start over no matter what their past was like. You know what's funny? Emily said, taking her coffee again. I thought I was only saving one life 6 months ago. One patient who needed help. I had no idea it would turn out this way. Did you feel bad about it? Raxthor asked. Deciding to stay here instead of going to work at Earth Medical Academy? Emily remembered the message she got 3 months ago. The official offer from Admiral Patricia Ross herself, giving her a high-profile job teaching at the most respected medical school in human space. Full professor, unlimited research funding, and the chance to change the future of medicine on hundreds of worlds. It was the goal she'd been working toward for her whole career. Everything she had hoped for when she was a medical student who was having a hard time and was in a lot of debt. She said no right away. Emily said firmly, no regrets. Not at all. Don't get me wrong, the academy would have been great. I could have taught hundreds of students, changed medical policy across the human space, and maybe even made a breakthrough that would have gotten my name in textbooks. But, Raxthor asked, but that would have been for me. About my job, my name, and what I leave behind. Emily pointed to the station, the ships coming and going, and the huge tapestry of different species working together. This is about something more. Everyone who comes through our doors thinks they are worthless, but they leave knowing they are important. Every warrior became a healer. Every lost soul that finds a reason to live again. That is worth more than any book or title of honor. Raxthor said, the idea of legacy is strange to humans. Valaxi measure worth in battles won, enemies defeated, territory conquered. You count the lives saved and the chances given. Different kinds of strength, Emily said. You taught me that it goes both ways. You know, I learned a lot from you too. About discipline, how to get through pain, and how to stay focused on something hard. Both of their communicators buzzed at the same time before Raxthor could answer. Emily looked at hers and felt her calm moment fade away. Alert for an emergency. A Kreth attack on a civilian convoy is causing multiple deaths. ETA, 15 minutes. Emily grumbled, so much for my coffee break, as she walked toward the door. Raxthor fell in step next to her, and his longer stride easily kept up with her quick pace. They ran through the halls together, and Emily couldn't help but notice how people reacted to them now. As they passed, the human crew members nodded in respect. A Hytherian doctor said hello. The Valaxi civilians they met were respectful instead of the disrespectful way their species usually treats humans. She realized that they had become a symbol. Proof that the old divisions and hatreds didn't have to shape the future. That foes could turn into friends. That honor could be rebuilt from scratch. When they got there, the medical bay was already in a state of organized chaos. Dr. Helen was in charge of triage, and her many arms were directing staff with ease. Tom had backup power systems ready to go. Tyler and his security team were making room for stretchers to come in. Talk to me, Helen, Emily said as she pulled on her surgical gloves with ease. 15 confirmed dead, maybe more. A mix of species. Burns, shrapnel wounds, and maybe exposure to radiation. Helen's compound eyes shone with a lot of focus. 3 important things need surgery right away. Raxthor, go to surgical bay 1. Bay 2 is mine. Helen, you take care of the rest. Emily was already on the move, forgetting how tired she was because of the rush of adrenaline and purpose. The next 6 hours were a blur of blood, sweat, and desperate accuracy. Emily lost track of how many patients she saw. A child with third-degree burns on half of her body. A golem with cracks in its crystal structure. Station Epsilon 7 stopped being just another medical facility floating in the dark of space as the years went by. It changed into something else. Something that people whispered about in 100 different worlds. People told it and retold it so many times that it became a legend, a story that was hard to tell apart from the truth. But the main part of the story, the part that was the most important, was completely true. This was the place where a Valaxi warrior had been left to die alone and forgotten, and his own people had called him worthless and dirty. And this is where one stubborn doctor said no to all of that. Just flat out said no. She had changed everything, not just for that one warrior but for the thousands and thousands who came after him. People who had been to the station or heard about what happened there spread the stories far and wide. Travelers, traders, refugees, and soldiers all did their part. In the Coalition Council chambers on the Central Worlds, they talked about it in the bright halls. In the dark corners of frontier bars where mercenaries and outcasts hung out, they whispered about it. Medical schools all over the world and beyond used it as a case study. It wasn't just a place anymore. Station Epsilon 7 was a thought. It showed that the universe could be different, that the old hatreds and divisions didn't have to last forever, and that change was possible even in the darkest parts of space. People said that even years later, you could still find Dr. Emily Grant there. She had turned down a dozen more offers to leave, each one more prestigious and profitable than the last. Schools wanted her to be a teacher. Medical companies wanted her to be in charge of research departments. Governments wanted her to give them advice on policy. And every time she politely said no and went back to work. She worked shifts that would break most doctors in half. Sometimes she worked for 36 hours straight, then slept for a few hours before going back to work. There was more gray in her hair now than there used to be, and the lines around her eyes had gotten deeper. But her hands were still steady and she was still completely determined. She still wouldn't turn anyone away no matter who they were, where they came from, or what they had done in the past. Raxthor always walked next to her. They now called him the Kesvoth, which means honor rebuilt. That name had spread across the galaxy just like the station story. He made that word up himself because there was no word in his language to describe what he had become. In Valaxi culture, you were either honorable or Kesthan, which meant you were broken and useless. There was no middle ground, no second chances, and no way to make things right. But Raxthor had made that middle ground by simply being stubborn, and now others were following his example. He taught anyone who wanted to learn. There were former warriors from 12 different species, each with their own scars and stories of being left behind. He taught them how to build instead of destroy and how to heal instead of hurt. His classes were famous in their own right. He was strict and wouldn't accept anything less than the best. But he was also patient in ways that surprised people who didn't know him. He knew better than anyone else what it was like to have to start over from scratch and learn a whole new way of living. People from all over came to train with him. Young Valaxi had been marked and left behind, but there were also people who wanted to learn his techniques, Hytherians who were interested in his approach to trauma medicine, and golems who were interested in his views on mental health and recovery. He taught them all the same thing that Emily had taught him years before. That there were many different kinds of strength. That the universe had been lying to them about what made a person good or valuable. Sometimes the best warrior wasn't the one with the most kills, medals, or bad reputation. Sometimes the best warrior was the one who put down their weapon and picked up a medical scanner instead. The one who used their strength to protect the weak instead of using it to control them. The person who didn't think of success as killing enemies but as saving lives and healing people. Raxthor would sometimes tell his students late at night, when the shifts were over and they were all tired, that the bravest thing a person could do was to care when no one else would. When the whole world was telling you that someone wasn't worth saving and culture, tradition, and politics all agreed that this person was disposable, sometimes the bravest thing you could do was to say no to all of that. To stay put and not move. To make a line in the sand and challenge anyone to cross it. He would say that was what Emily had done for him. That was the line she had drawn. She had stood there alone against the whole Valaxi Empire, her own bosses, common sense, self-preservation, and every other logical reason why she should just give up and let him die. And she had won, not by using force or violence, but by being so stubbornly kind and refusing to accept the world as it was. The medical bay had grown so much over the years that it now took up almost half of the station. As more patients came in, more species came in for treatment, and the station's reputation grew, new wings were added. There were hundreds of thank you notes in different languages on the walls, pictures of patients who had recovered and gone on to live full lives, and artwork made by families who were grateful. It was like walking through a museum of second chances, a gallery of lives that almost ended but didn't. On quiet nights, which didn't happen very often but did happen from time to time, Emily and Raxthor would sometimes end up back in the original medical bay where it all began. The bed where Raxthor had first woken up was still there, on purpose to remind him. They would sit in the observation area and talk about how far they had come while looking at the stars. Emily would joke that she thought she was only saving one life that day, the life of one patient who needed help. She had no idea that she was starting a movement, making a legend, and changing the way many species thought about honor, worth, and redemption. She probably wouldn't have believed them if they had told her what would happen in the future. Raxthor would say that he thought his life was over because being Kess then meant death with no way out. He had come to terms with the fact that he would die alone, forgotten, and not missed. It would have seemed like an impossible dream that he would become a teacher, a healer, and someone that other people looked up to and asked for advice. But things that shouldn't have happened all the time on Station Epsilon 7. That was kind of the point of it all. When someone cared enough to make it happen and didn't accept the limits that everyone else did, the impossible became possible. Every wall and uniform at the station had the same motto, which came from something Emily said when she was trying to protect Raxthor during those early, desperate days. Someone had asked her why she was putting everything on the line for one patient, and she had simply said, "Because someone has to care." Those words echoed through the galaxy. They became a rallying cry for doctors and nurses who had to work in very bad conditions. People quoted them in speeches and added them to codes of medical ethics. They were on patches and pins worn by people from 1,000 different humanitarian groups. Because that was the truth at the core of everything. The universe was a big, cold, and sometimes mean place. Species fought each other for land, resources, and old grudges. Cultures put up walls around themselves and said that everyone who wasn't inside those walls was less important, different, or disposable. Every day, people were thrown away for reasons that were either random or totally crazy. And most of the time, no one did anything to stop it. It was easier to ignore it, accept the way things were, and say that nothing could be done to change it. But Station Epsilon 7 showed that this was not true. Things might not stay the same. People might change. When faced with living proof that their way wasn't the only way, whole cultures might have to rethink their basic beliefs. It only took one person to care when no one else would. Someone who would draw that line and not move no matter what came at them. Someone who is brave, stubborn, or crazy enough to look at something that seems impossible and decide to do it anyway. That's where Raxthor the Kesvoth and Emily Grant were. That was the line they drew together, between people and Valaxi, between doctors and patients who became friends and co-workers. And even years later, decades later, they were still there. Still getting better. Still saying no to everyone. Still showing every day that kindness wasn't a sign of weakness, that second chances were real, and that no one was truly beyond saving. Eventually, the story of Station Epsilon 7 would live on after both of them. Their story would be told and retold for generations, probably with more details added and made into myths until the real people behind it were almost unrecognizable. But the main truth would still be there. A human medic changed everything, not by using violence or force, but by simply caring about someone that everyone else had given up on. And by doing this, she had shown the whole galaxy what people were really like. What they could do at their best. The universe would never be the same again.